We all have stories, every single one of us. From the highest of the high to the lowest of the low, we all have stories. Exploring the world for the greatest stories of all time.
Hello and welcome. You're listening to the Aron O'Dowd Show.
The Aron O'Dowd Show. Our soul is the screen upon which we project our dreams. What's your story?
Hello and welcome. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night. Wherever you are in the world, you're tuning into the Aron O'Dowd Show, where we're going to understand some big concepts with big stories to share with the superheroes and the superstars in the world. Make sure you subscribe, comment, and beat that, smash that, and like that button because it helps the old show get where it needs to go. You know, so for someone that has probably, I think, 3 or 4 near-death experiences throughout my life, I understand that there's a different aspect of the world, and we come back and we realize, wow, I just got new tools, new energies, new upgrades, and so on. And that's what we're going to talk about today with some incredible guests who have either experienced or understood or in the research of what it's like, how it is, and what it is to be near-death experience. I'd like to welcome Therese Laux, who I think is related to Goldilocks in some way, but we'll find out.
That's right.
And Lisa Smart, because she is smarter than Albert Einstein. So hello, guys, and welcome.
Thanks for having us, Aron.
Thank you.
Tell us about how you guys met each other.
Do you want to start, T? Well,
go ahead, Lisa. Oh, okay. All right. So at any rate, I was putting together a book about the experience I was living. And I thought, I wonder if this has ever happened before. Has anyone ever had an experience where they're receiving text messages from someone who's long dead, or deceased? And I thought, I've got to do some Googling, of course, to figure out, is there stuff out there? I couldn't find anything, but I ran across Lisa Smart's page where she talked about near-death experience and about her research with Dr. Raymond Moody, who's associated with actually coining the term near-death experience. Is that right, Lisa?
Absolutely. And Raymond and I put together the website lifeafterlife.com that was named after his classic bestseller that he published, I think 75, that has sold millions of copies. And he and I have been working together now for a decade. And on lifeafterlife.com, I had a page where I talked about one of the things I love to do is work with other people who are at the cutting edge of consciousness studies and bring their work forward. My book, Words of the Threshold, is based on my research into people's final words. And Raymond and I have been researching people's final words over the last decade. And so I love to bring other people out with their research and with their investigations. And when Therese contacted me, I was absolutely blown away by her story, and I knew it was a book that had to be written. So when she asked me to help her coach her through the writing of it, I was just completely honored, and that's how we met.
Wow. And we've all experienced near death, but what is it exactly?
Oh, what exactly is a near-death experience? A near-death experience is when someone clinically is dead, right? The line, they have flatlined, right? Clinically, and it can be, it's usually a very brief amount of time. But during that time, while the doctors and all the medical professionals are saying, whoa, this person's dead, they're gone, the patient actually is experiencing the most expansive moments of their lives. A common thing we hear from people who have near-death experiences is, I've never felt as alive as when I was dead. They have these experiences, and it begins with them first rising above their bodies and looking down and seeing the people in the medical room, wherever they are, hospital, doctor's office, or maybe they were in a car accident and they're on the road and they move up above themselves. And then the next stage is they'll just keep going up and up and up, and they'll move through a tunnel. Oftentimes they describe some kind of tunnel or valley, and they'll encounter deceased relatives, and those relatives bring them through a tunnel over to what we call the other side. And then people have an experience that they call the life review, where they review their life. And often they meet with what people describe a being of light. So some people call it God. Some people just say it's a light that guides them through this life experience. And then after that, there's a moment where they need to make a decision. Are they going to go to the next kind of landmark? And oftentimes that landmark is some kind of river or mountains down, and people need to make a decision whether they're going to do that, or God or higher power or the light, whatever. Everyone has a different name for that. Will often say, you need to go back now because of your children. Or they might ask the person, do you want to continue on? And that's kind of a very brief look at the near-death experience. But it's something that, thousands of people have reported, and Dr. Raymond Moody has interviewed thousands around the world who have had this experience. And then they come back. They come back to life many times, and they've had this incredible tale to tell of being on the other side. And oftentimes they come back transformed. So they might be clinically dead, and then they're resuscitated, and they have this amazing story to tell, and their lives have changed forever, of course, after that occurs.
That's like the best field trip ever. Using my teacher lingo.
That's a cool way to describe it. Teresa, you've written a book. What made you write a book about this subject?
Well, because it was such an amazing experience. This was an experience where my wife had been diagnosed with breast cancer and had just undergone a double mastectomy, just came home from the hospital. She's sleeping. I'm in the kitchen doing who knows what, because I'm not so good in the kitchen. But I got a text on my phone. You hear that ding of your phone going off. Mm-hmm. And I looked at it, and it was from my wife, Laura. And I'm like, well, this doesn't make sense because I know she's sleeping. And it was such a strangely weirded text. And it was from my father, who died when I was 2. He died of pancreatic cancer. And he shared some things that like only Laura, myself, and he would know, I guess. And so I walked into the bedroom to see, what is she sitting on the phone texting? That would make no sense because she can barely move. And she's asleep, completely out. And I picked up her phone from the nightstand, and there was that text. You know how you look at your phone and see how a text has been sent? Mm-hmm. And I'm like, wow, that's weird. And I thought, well, I really don't even know how to process this. So I just stood there and I waited, and I thought, well, I can't really wake her up and say, hey, I want to talk about this. I mean, because hello, she just had surgery. And it's like, well, I'll just stand here and wait, like how you can sense when someone's staring at you, So I just kind of stood there, and she did wake up eventually and said, what are you doing? Why are you standing there like that? And I showed her the phone and said, did you send this? And she's like, what is it? I said, it's a text. And she said, read it to me. And I read it. And she looked at me like, I have no clue what this is. And that just started everything in terms of trying to figure out what's going on, what's not going on. We spent so much time discussing, what is this all about? That's where it began.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no, go ahead.
How did it feel to get that text message from your dad?
It was such a mix of emotions, because this is a text from my father, who I had no recall of, and who I was actually quite angry towards most of my life, until this, because he, had left us. He died when I was 2. It's like the ultimate checkout in terms of great. And the challenge with that was myself and my 2 sisters, we were left with my mom, who was not ever going to get a good parent award. And in fact, she would get the opposite. And so I thought, great, the good parent leaves and we're stuck with someone who's really stressed, who can't handle situations, and life is kind of a nightmare. And so I was mad at him. But then through this whole process of our communication, it's like all that went away, and everything he shared brought it all into perspective. And I love my dad now. The experience was much like if he had been living in a physical existence, it wouldn't have been any different.
And I was really intrigued by T's story for so many reasons. But when I did research on the Final Words Project with Dr. Moody, and my book, Words at the Threshold, is based on that research, this was back in 2015, but I had spoken to people who had described to me that as their mother, father, loved one was dying, and many times they were in comas, completely non-communicative, people would receive text messages. And I only received, I think it was a total of 3 case studies, because this was back 10 years ago and technology was lit. But it really seems to me that spirit is beginning to come, is using technology, beginning to leverage technology to communicate. And Teresa's story is amazing because I think you have 5 years of text message communications from her father. And for me as a researcher, this is just absolutely mind-blowing. And yeah, so it's just mind blowing. Say more, Teresa. Share more about it.
Right. It was such an amazing process because at the beginning, we had this initial text and we spent so much, literally days thinking, what is this? What do you think it is? But at the same time, we have to deal with our normal life of living and of dealing with cancer and surgery and post-recovery and all of this. But we kept thinking, what is this? What should we do about it? Because I was a high school computer science teacher and kind of a bossy Betty know-it-all. So I thought, well, someone's trying to hack our phone. But then it's like, wait a minute, that's not so easy. And what would be the point? There's nothing to gain. What would be the motivation? And so we just banter about these possibilities. And then in a month, we got another text. And it had a little bit more information directing us on what to do and how to be a better human. And then it's like, we're back to the, what is going on here? Let's try to figure this out. And then in another month, we got another one. And it was like, by this time, we had tried to put some stuff together, like, why was this happening? And so we looked at things like, is it close to the full moon? Old school. And then we thought, what's in common is all these incidents, they were kind of coinciding with these major upheavals. So in our hometown of Omaha, Nebraska, one of the events coincided with this shooting of a police officer who was just beloved in the community. And it was huge. And so there's this massive amount of pain in the community. And so his text kind of coincided with that. And we thought, well, he was a lawyer in his last earth life. Maybe he has something to do with law enforcement or something like that. But at the end of the day, we thought, why don't we just text back? We hadn't thought about that. It's like, okay, maybe we should try that. And we did. And that kind of opened the floodgates towards this back and forth conversation, which we would call textversations, texting and conversation, textversation. And it was just amazing. And I kind of look at it as you would any other parent, or like how I would talk with my students sometimes. You start with something good, like, oh, I'm really proud of you, that kind of thing. And then it's like, hey, I want to talk to you about something because I've noticed something I'm not very happy with, And it took that route. And it's like, oh, here's a father I never had, but that's okay because I'm getting to know him. And it was amazing on so many levels, and past that, the iteration became one of Laura and I could just be talking to each other saying, hey, do you wonder about this? What do you think he would say about that? What would Fred say? That was his name, Fred. And we didn't even have to text him. He would hop right into the conversation. And it's like, sometimes I share this story and some people are skeptical, but it's like, our hands weren't on our phones. We are in the same place, because the first criticism is, oh, I bet Laura's texting. It's like, no. And when you read his text, you realize it's kind of a older style language. It's like the language of his time. He has words in there that it's like, oh, nobody uses that word. It's like it's from his last Earth life. So they weren't totally dope like we are now. So.
Yeah. And when you're receiving these, are you thinking, I'm going crazy? My father on the other side's texting me. I don't know this man, but yet the relationship is building over text message after text message, right?
Well, yeah, it was just it was like, what is this going on? And especially Laura, she's like, how's this happening? Because it would originate coming out of her phone. And we would ask my dad about that. And he said, well, she gave me permission. And he almost said it like, well, if you want to use something that doesn't belong to you, you ask permission of the person, And he said he asked her permission. She said, I don't remember anyone, let alone your deceased father, asking permission. And he would explain it was because of her third eye. She had some really powerful third eye abilities, and that granted him access. And in terms of devices, he could use any device as long as it came through her.
Wow.
So I know, but like when you look at, like, if you go back and look at what Einstein did, it's like everything's energy, and mobile devices all operate on that modulation and demodulation of digital information to analog, and it's just streams of energy. And if we ourselves are nothing but energy, we're just using a different vehicle.
For sure. And Lisa, when you're listening to Teresa talk about her story and what's experiencing, are you thinking, is this crazy? Have I seen this before? What's running through your mind when you're hearing all this for the first time?
That's a great question. When someone comes to me and asks them to help them write a book, part of my job, I feel, is to make sure the person I'm working with is authentic and credible. Because if I'm going to invest those hours and connect them with other people in the field, I want to make sure they're a credible voice. And, at first I was, I did get some, when I did my research with the Final Words Project, as I had indicated, I did hear of other people who had communications through text. It's just a small handful. But so my mind was open, but honestly, at first I was skeptical. And then I got to know T, and first she's a PhD, EDD, she's had a lot of education. She's a skeptic herself. She's a scientist. She's a tech. She's a high tech, professor of English. I beg your pardon. High school teacher.
Computer science. Yeah.
But your credentials were amazing, and it took a little time for me to completely buy into it, because it really stretches the imagination, right? It stretches our ideas. However, as I mentioned before, I had seen indications of this 2015 in my own research with Dr. Moody. So my mind was open, and now that I've gotten to know her and I've seen the text, I mean, she kept all the texts that were on the phone. I mean, she is a scientist. She was scientifically trained. That's the way she thinks. So she kept records of everything. And I have no doubt now that her experience, is absolutely real. And that's why it's been really exciting for me to work with her, because we're talking about being at the cutting edge of something where technology and spirit are joining together. And as T explained, it really makes sense in terms of energy. So yeah, but at first I was skeptical. Yeah, I was a little skeptical.
And I love Vivian's question here about how she can get her father to text her. And it's like the experience Laura and I had, I would wish that for absolutely everyone. And I find that when talking about this, people get excited, like, how can I get this? Or sometimes they get mad, like, why you and not me? I think that's a human thing. But it's like, I think with us, it was a matter, as Fred, my father, said, Laura had this amazing third eye. She grew up a very sickly child. Asthma was huge. She spent a lot of time sitting, doing things inside a house. She wasn't out riding a bike or playing freeze tag or stuff like that. because she wasn't able to do that. And I think she developed that part of her mind that's able to connect like that. And in terms of getting, how can I connect with someone who's deceased? I think it's a matter of realizing, okay, everyone's not going to be able to just pick up the phone and send a text message, but everyone who's left, they are right here, yet very far away. And my father talked about this a lot of times, just they're right here. You know, they could be sitting on the couch with you, watching TV with you, which he liked to do. And at the same time, they're far away. And he said, it's really difficult to explain how this works, but that's exactly what it is. And that whole concept of this, I call it a neural network, you know, because again, I'm using computer science concepts that I'm familiar with. It's like having this big fishnet of everyone's connected, and we truly are all connected. And even though they're no longer here with us physically, they want to help us, which is another point he made. They're just sitting there waiting for us to ask, but we have to ask with clarity. Sometimes people say, gosh, I want to hear from you. I need some help, but they're not clear on what help they need. And so maybe it's a matter of, instead of saying, so-and-so, whoever it is that's passed, I need your help on this. Well, what kind of help is that? Because sometimes they forget how things work. Like my father forgot how money worked. Didn't understand, what's this money, you know, forgot money, you know. It's like he's been gone too long because I know I'm going down a tangent, but he wanted me to do something. I said, I've got to go to work. And it's like, you know, it's like he didn't get that. It's like, I have to go to work because I need money because we have bills with this.
I think we lost.
No.
I think we have technical difficulties, so roll on and we'll try to get her back.
Stay tuned, everyone. But Lisa, I want to ask you, before you joined the Raymond Mooney's program, were you into near-death experiences? Were you open to spirituality? Tell us more.
Yeah, you know, I was open to spirituality, but I had a big dose of sort of skeptic in me. I was sort of like, prove it to me, show it to me. And then I wanted to believe it all because, right, it's comforting. But I was going to UC Berkeley, and I was academically oriented. I was studying linguistics, which is the study of language, and I was particularly interested in cognitive, how our minds work, and cognitive science and language. Oh, Jesus. Yay!
The joys of technology, you know. But continue, Lisa, and we'll bring Teresa back in to finish her answer there. So
I was, my training was at UC Berkeley, and it was in linguistics and cognitive science. And at the time that I became interested in final words, I was working with students who had reading challenges, and I was studying how the mind works and how to help people read better and more effectively, adults and children and teenagers. And then what happened, my father became very ill and died very quickly over a period of several weeks. And his language started changing. And I became really intrigued by the things he was saying in his final weeks. And I just wrote everything down because as a linguist, that's what I was trained to do, with language. If you're going to study it, if something intrigues you, write it down and track it. So I tracked a lot of my dad's final words. And when he passed, I went to UC Berkeley, where I was a student, to the linguistics department. And I told one of my old profs, I want everything there is about people's final words. And he looked at me like I was crazy. Like, we don't really have anything about the language of the dying. We have a lot about children's language and, about acquisition of toddlers and baby language. But we don't have much about what people say at the end of life. So I started doing some research about who might have some interest in final words. And what I discovered is Dr. Moody, not only is he an MD who was studying near-death experiences, but he also had a PhD in philosophy, and he was particularly interested in language. And so he and I by incredible series of coincidences, he and I ended up connecting, and we started working together on the research into people's final words and what it revealed about consciousness. And then at that time is when I started hearing about text messages that people were getting, just a few, but enough to make me curious. So when T contacted me, I was like, oh my God, this builds upon the research that Raymond and I began 10 years ago.
Wow. Incredible. It just shows you that anything's possible. And had you any experiences of the afterlife texting you, Lisa?
No, I haven't personally, but I'm very open to it. And I've heard so many stories, because Raymond and I have interviewed so many people. And I'm just, my mind is completely open to it, but I have not had that experience. And that's part of why, Teresa's experiences is so exciting because, Vivian asked, how can I get my father to text? Because it's such an exciting and intriguing idea. And I'm thinking that through her book and her ideas, maybe we can get clues about how we ourselves can connect with spirit in our lives.
Sometimes I think we have these preconceived notions of what the communication has to be. Another point my dad made was that we all need to pay attention to what we see and what we hear, because everyone obviously isn't going to get a text on their phone, but you're going to maybe have a stranger come up to you at the grocery store and say something that takes you back to a memory with that person. Or maybe you're going to see something like, everyone has heard the story of like, oh, this red bird visited me on my patio and that was my Aunt Betty saying hello, that kind of thing. These kind of incidents, they can make these things happen quite easily because it's a matter of, manipulating things in terms of tapping someone on the shoulder and saying, hey, I want you to go talk to this person and mention this. And that's a way they can communicate as well through other people. And one of the other things that surprised me is animals, because we are all connected, even to animals, to rocks, everything has energy. But like animals, and especially dogs, are very open to letting them step into their body. So whenever I see a car going down the road with the dog, with its head out, I think, I wonder who that is, because, the person driving thinks, oh, that's my little dog Fluffy. But maybe someone else is taking that brief moment in that body because now they can remember what it's like to smell, to feel the wind on their face, because you don't feel that in the afterlife. You don't have a physical body. Or a cell phone, or hands. so.
And I,
go ahead, Lisa. Jump in there.
Well, I'm particularly interested in the connection between language and consciousness. That's sort of my field. And, I've discovered with myself something called automatic writing, because I also love to write creatively. And, there are certain things people can do in the morning just to begin to open up the channel, or that I've done. I haven't been able to get text messages from my loved ones, but sometimes what I'll do, or many times actually in the morning, I'll put on certain kinds of frequencies that to listen to open up my mind and connect me more with spirit. And I'll do like a deep meditation and just pull out a pad and just start writing and seeing what comes out. And I have gotten communications from my mother and father that way. So it's more old school. It's just a pencil and a book. It's not quite high tech communication. But that's one way that people can maybe take a first step. And again, with T, what a blessing, what a gift. I don't think you directly asked for it, but her father appeared at a time that was, an incredible challenge when her wife was dying. And so maybe the portal was open. In my research with words at threshold when people are dying, there seems like the portal opens and language, there's like an invitation for language to come in unique and special ways. Yeah. So,
boy, I completely agree with you, Lisa. And it's like, I also think about, there has to be a reason this is happening. And I don't see it as it was just a gift for Laura and myself. This is something that everything he shared with me, I have to share with as many people as possible, because it makes a difference in terms of how we can all be a better human and work for a peaceful and more loving place for all of us. And that's got to be the importance behind it. It's not, it can't be just a little private event for us, which is awesome, but it's like meant to share this. What he said matters.
And what was the most profound message that made you think, wow, and I gotta share this, kind of all the messages you received?
You know, my gosh, there's so many, and I have a lot of favorites. I think the big message for everyone is all of us are connected. What good, bad, or ugly, it's like we are all connected, and evil does exist. We exist in a balance, but maybe evil is really just younger souls who haven't advanced in terms of understanding a better way. We're all connected, but you know, he also communicated about what it's like to pass and how you're just surrounded by love and peace. And it's like, who would not want that? You know, it's like, there's nothing to fear. And so many things. We're all living a life here on earth as a human right now, but it's not the only place to be, and human's not the only form. And sometimes I think about how we question a lot about, is there life on other planets, whatever? Well, I think that needs to expand to other dimensions, because yes, there is.
Your relationship with your father, has that blossomed into the man you wish you had based on the text messages you've been receiving?
Oh, what a great question. Absolutely. You know, so all the anger I had towards him for leaving us, you know, and how can you fault someone who dies? But I did, because, you know, I was a kid. It's like, yeah, that's all gone. And I have so much love for him, and I've forgiven my mother completely, you know, and I have love for her. And it's like, you know, I have to wake up every day finding a way to find the joy and to find a way to make love happen in the world. You know, if everyone got up and did just one positive thing or one positive thought, I mean, we could change so much. But yeah, I've gotten to know him as a person, and I've appreciated his wisdom that is not just his, but like, as he calls it, astral knowledge. And it's been life-changing. I'm a different person now. I wasn't the best human. I'm a better human now. So
it's so similar to what we hear from people who have near-death experiences. And they all share the same thing, that what they discover when they go to the other side, when they die for that short period of time, what they learn is that we're here to learn lessons of love, right? And it's not always easy. I mean, lessons of love, it sounds great, but, you know, Raymond shares this story about one of his patients who had died come back. And he was talking about this beautiful place he went to on the other side with this being of light, and he felt connected to everyone. And he just had this incredibly transcendent experience. And then when he recovered a couple months later and he was in his car, someone honked at him on the LA freeway, and he turned around and gave him the finger, right? You know, so, you know, there's a big gap between what we know in our minds about lessons of love and being more loving and getting through the day, you know, and actually practicing it. And one of the things I really love about Teresa's book is that her father's actually giving some real life tips for how to be a better human. And, you know, we need those tips, or at least I do. I can speak for myself. And I thought it's so great with Fred, the way he, you know, in very practical ways, on a you know, every text, he referred to things that were going on in her life and giving her advice. And it, you know, what an incredible experience to have spirit right with you, giving you, and especially a father you lost, and he comes back to give you good advice.
Lisa, in reading the book as a third person, do you feel you could understand and see the love and understand the father that was going through the text messages?
Yeah, he had a very different voice. This is one of the things too about when spirit comes, you know, there's really a different quality to the voice, or there's just, you know, it's not your own mind thinking, right? It's something different. And Fred has a really distinct voice, the way he talks to her, the nicknames that he gives her. And the advice is very practical, even though he's this very loving spirit. He's pretty practical. I mean, he may not know about money, but he does give her some really good advice throughout about work and relationships and so forth. So I think we can learn a lot from how spirit appears to other people as well. Of course, we pray, all of us, I imagine, that spirit will come and give us good advice when we need it. Yeah.
Teresa, what was the best advice your father gave you?
He had so many really good points to make, and family first was always something that came through. Family takes precedence in terms of, over whatever else you have going on. Like, so don't be consumed by your work. And probably the one that really relates to everyone is love really is all that you take with you, and how much love you gather in your lifetime and how it collects on you. And when you leave here, it really helps you. And he didn't explain much more about that. Like, is it like a love bank account? And the more you have, you can get a better place on the other side, but, and maybe so, but love is really all you take. And what you should do is always focus on being your most loving self, because it really matters.
When people talk about the life review and the near-death experience, when they're on the other side, as they're clinically dead, what they talk about, it's not that God or the being of light is there going, oh, you were bad. There's none of that finger pointing. People don't describe it that way. What they describe is that they experience life from the point of view of other people. So, if you had a child and you screamed at that child a lot your whole life, when you go through you experience the screaming from the perspective of that child. So you have a very direct of how your actions and your words impacted others. So it's not just that kind of wussy force of love is beautiful, but you really get to feel how your actions throughout your life impacted others. And for those who do come back after being clinically dead and coming back, being resuscitated, that is so compelling for them because they feel in such a real way how their actions and their words have hurt other people. And all of them come back saying, we are here to learn how to love. And that life review, I mean, we're talking about thousands of people have described that this life review process is all about deepening our compassion and understanding the impacts of our actions and our words. So, we're talking about something that's very practical and very real, and not just a floating theory. That love, and how do we make love real? How do we put love into action? Well, that's kind of the next question, right? In our lives, I think. How do we make it real? That's not always the easy part. Teresa's giving away with when people come onto her website, and they what is it? If they subscribe to her book, but she has a button that says "Love More," and I love the story. Do you mind sharing that story, T, about how that?
Oh, sure. So I meant to put one on today. Yes, and so like if people go to the website today, BeTheRailing.com, they can click to get a button. I'll mail it out to them. It's a little button. It says "Love More." And the way this came about is when Laura passed from this existence. So
she's no longer here.
She's no longer here, but like I was in our dining room signing papers for hospice care, and she was sleeping in the bedroom, and I had a audio monitor on because I wanted to make sure, like, even if I wasn't there, I could hear what was going on. And I heard something, so I went in there, and the hospice nurse, came with me, and but before I got to the room, in my head, I got the message, "Love more." And it's like I knew she was leaving. She was saying goodbye, I'm checking out now. And that was her final thought, but it was delivered telepathically. Love more. So.
Does she still communicate with you as well as your dad?
Yes, but it's different. I'm not getting text messages. It's like, I feel like with my dad, it's like a download, like automatically, bam, it's in my head. Or with like Laura, it's like I feel a presence and then a thought. It's a much slower delivery than my dad, because my dad's just like, boom, there it is right here, and he usually pops in when I'm doing some home chore. So like if I'm on a ladder and I'm going to nail something and I'm being a little lazy thinking, oh, I should probably use a drill, but I'm just going to kind of hammer the screw in, see if this works, he'll mention what to do. Or like there's one situation, I was kind of reworking a cabinet in the kitchen and I was going to cut it. And like I heard this, are you sure you need to do that? And I thought, oh, okay, that's right. I should probably measure first. And sure enough, I didn't need to do the cutting. So like he likes to hop in those kind of things, and it's bam right there. So it's just a different way. So, and I think all of us can hear from those that we are attached to, that are on the other side. We just have to figure out what works. Lisa mentioned automatic writing and having sounds of different vibrations to open up that channel. For me, it's always about being outside, making sure I have outside time every day, and being in nature and being around trees, stuff like that. So I don't think there's one rule or formula or recipe to make this happen. It's finding out what works for you, because it's individual.
Why do you think love is so important as us as souls to come here and learn and develop?
That's interesting, because it's like, isn't it the best feeling ever? It's like, given the choice of being surrounded by love or being surrounded by hate, I'm going to choose love every day, and it makes me think, if I had a student one year, and Alex, I don't know if you're listening, but he's an adult now, but I remember in 9th grade, he got his first girlfriend, and he told me one day, I just love holding hands with her. And I said, it's like the best feeling ever, isn't it? And it was so sweet. And it's like, no one says, oh gosh, I like it when someone picks up a stick and hits me. That's the best feeling ever. They never say that. It's all about the love, all about the fabulous memories of seeing your child smile, or hitting that ball out of the park when they had not gotten a hit all season long, and then finally it connects. It's like those moments of joy and love are what matters, because they generate such goodness.
In the research that I did with the Final Words Project, there's something called terminal lucidity. And in many cases, when people are dying, they may be in a coma or completely unresponsive, but a few days before they die, they'll have something called the sunset day, or terminal lucidity, as I mentioned, and suddenly they're communicative. Suddenly there's a surge. The medical explanation is there's a surge of adrenaline before the person dies and they become lucid again. But during those times of lucidity, before someone dies, after being unresponsive, they don't say like, your husband was so awful, what a terrible person he was. What they really talk about is love. I'm sorry for all the times that I didn't love you better. Like, for example, one of the people I interviewed, her father-in-law always criticized her and criticized the way she looked, which was really kind of mean-spirited, and made fun of her because of the way she looked. And when he had that terminal lucidity a few days before he died, he looked at her and he said, "Maya, I never noticed how beautiful you are." And she said to him, "I think it's because you're looking at me now with God's eyes." Right? But in those moments before people die, there's always like they ask for forgiveness, or they recognize the beauty in someone. In those last days, it's very rare to have someone turn to someone and say, I always hated your guts. And this whole those aren't the words that we often hear. There are a few exceptions. There are. But generally what we hear are words of love. As people come closer to what I call God or a higher power or the light, their words turn towards loving. And it's so, and that's the challenge for us as human beings, is how do we live in a crazy world and maintain that ability to bring the light into our lives. And I think we're all trying to do that. I hope some of us at least are.
Based on the research you've done, Lisa, is there any secrets that we need to know about love or life that you've come across?
Well, I can just speak very specifically about final words. That, when someone we love is dying, it can be really scary. And T can probably share some of her thoughts too about that. But, really, it's if we can enter that time of life as a sacred time. And I suggest people write down what they hear from their loved ones and not judge it as crazy or insane, but really write the words down, honor, and you'll start hearing metaphors. People will start talking about the big trip that they're going to take. And instead of saying, oh, come on, Grandma, you're not going anywhere. You're in the hospital. It's like, oh, you're going on a trip. Where are you going, Grandma? Or, you'll hear people say things, I need my passport. Oh, you do? I'll get you your passport. Where are you going to go? So those dying days or weeks, sometimes people speak what may look like nonsense on the surface, but if you open your heart and your ears, you will be kind of privy to going across the threshold with your loved ones. So some of the advice I would give in terms of final words, and any time that kind of the spirit talks to you, even if it seems nonsensical, open up your ears. And oftentimes as people are dying, I think they're kind of embodying already the other world. But it can sound kind of kooky sometimes. It doesn't always make sense. But, to keep our hearts open and to communicate, you'll hear things like, oh, I think the train is running behind schedule. Oh, what's Grandpa talking about? Yeah, we got to fix those tracks. And then the next day, Grandpa might say, yeah, the conductor's coming. And then the next day, because if you write everything down, you see many times the dying are telling stories as they're approaching threshold. Yeah, time to get my bags. Oh, Grandpa, are you going on a trip? So if you really listen and write down what people say as they're dying, oftentimes you'll be surprised by the kinds of metaphors and kind of pearls of wisdom and light. Just like that person during terminal lucidity was able to see the beauty in the daughter-in-law that he always sort of criticized. Those words hold a lot of light and love. So that would be my advice: is if someone is dying, keep your heart keep your heart and your ears open, and be in conversation with them, and don't put them down and criticize them and judge them. Those are my last words for today.
It's interesting too, is sometimes, I think people don't realize people don't die in real life like they do on television. Not like what you see in movies. They're not just all completely lucid all the way to the end, surrounded by all these loved ones, and they, take one last sentence and they're gone. I don't think it works that way. And sometimes they don't leave until we're gone, in terms of they don't always want us in the room standing with 20 people around their bedside, and they're not going to leave until you're all gone, because it's a private event to them. And I've heard from so many people who've had that experience where they feel almost guilty because they weren't right there with their loved one, holding their hand, whispering in their ear, having a great conversation, because it just didn't work that way. That doesn't mean you failed as a human. It's just they didn't want to have you go through that process with them, in terms of they're trying to spare you, I think.
Well, the classic story is people will be around someone's bedside as they're dying, and the whole family is there holding vigil, wanting to be there for that last breath, not wanting their loved one to leave on their own, right? And then they're all like, oh, God, we're so hungry. Let's just run out and get something. And everyone goes out together for lunch, just a short break. We'll get back to grandma. And then while they're gone, the person passes away. And people often feel so badly. But just exactly as she said, many times, I think people, when they leave, that they're making a connection with what I call the light or God. And it's a very private passing. And it's not always true. My father stayed to say to my mother, thank you, I love you, and was right there with her. But even my mother died recently, and she didn't want me to die with her in the room. I was very clear. She said, go, come on, go live your life. And she died with her caregiver there, and she didn't want me there. It was too, when my father was dying, he said something which is a kind of a typical thing that someone might say when they're dying. He said, Lisa, there's so much so in sorrow. That doesn't make sense logically. So much so in sorrow? But really, he was expressing something that does make sense, right? He was trying to say, this is so sorrowful. There's so much so in all this, right? And, those are the kinds of feelings that we do feel. And he really felt there's so much so in sorrow. And he didn't want me either in the room when he passed, because he knew how deeply sorrowful it was for me. And he expressed it in almost poetic ways, as many people when they're dying do. They use kind of a whole new language when they're at the threshold.
This has been a fascinating conversation. If people want to hear more or read more, where can they find you guys?
Well, they can find me at the Final Words Project .org.
And my website is Be the Railing, as in BETHE, Railing, RAILING, BeTheRailing.com. And I've got a lot of quotes from Fred and different resources people can check out. And today I'll load up like the first couple chapters from the book, so people can check that out if they want to read it.
Guys, thank you so much for this conversation, because we need to hear people like you share what you got to share. So thank you.
Thanks for having us, Aron. It's been great.
Fantastic. There you go. Near death is something to be applauded, sacred, and experience that we all need to appreciate, because ma, pa, grandpa could be in your room around you telling you all the incredible things. And remember, stay tuned next week, because we have another incredible guest to share the superstar and what makes them incredible. So remember, like, subscribe, and smash that like, and tune in next week for another incredible superstar. Rock on.
Thank you for listening to the Aron O'Dowd Show, where the world's best stories are told. If you like, please post a review or subscribe to the show. To find out more, contact us at aronodowd.com. That's ARONODOWD.com. We're always ready to share another magnificent tale from the world's best storytellers. So stay tuned.